Vermont PBS presents the Governor's Press Conference. Governor Peter Shumlin meets the media to address issues of importance in Vermont.
As you know, I feel very, very strongly that Montpelier should not limit in any way Vermonters' ability to give to charity, both in and outside of Vermont. As you know, both the House and the Senate have passed tax policies that they proposed that would limit the ability for Vermonters to give to the charities that are so important to us. So, I just can't tell you how strongly I feel that this would be really bad public policy for Vermont. This is a state that absolutely depends upon our nonprofits. Our quality of life, who we are as Vermonters, is made possible in part because of the extraordinary work that our charities do to make this state a better place to live. And of all the choices that we must make, and I know there are many ahead, the wrong choice is to limit the ability of Vermonters to give to the charities that sustain us.
Governor, I just had a question. I'm a little confused. Part of your tax package was to do away with state and local taxes that would be deducted. The package in the House and the Senate is somewhere, $33–35 million. Your plan raised 15. Now you had the payroll tax, but that's gone. So how do you make up, if you don't like these tax sources that they're considering in the House and the Senate, how do you make up the difference?
Well, first of all, as I've said very clearly, since the payroll tax wasn't adopted, since we're not going to have the $40 million surplus from that would have helped us deal with next year's problem, I feel very strongly that we should make additional cuts, as I've put forward, and that we should take those very seriously. Now, I've also said, and I'll say it again, I'm not saying it's my way or the highway on taxes. I am saying that removing the charitable deduction, the ability for Vermonters to deduct home interest from their mortgages, which promotes home buying, and removing the health care deduction when you have catastrophic health care costs is a big mistake, and I'm very concerned about it.
So what you're saying that there may be other elements of the House and Senate plan, if they get rid of this, are there other elements that you might find acceptable?
That's correct.
Which ones?
I will work that out with the leadership.
Well, you're saying it's not your way or the highway, right?
That's correct.
So can you identify which taxes, other than the payroll tax the legislature has rebuffed?
I won't do that because I'm going to negotiate directly with the House and the Senate leadership, and I don't think I should, have a public negotiation. Having said that,
isn't that what you're doing right here? You're having a public negotiation.
No.
You're saying this is off the table. So what's on the table?
What I've made very clear, and I'll say it again, is that I believe strongly that because we're looking at a $50 to $70 million problem next year, we should do some additional cutting before the legislature goes home, and we should not make the mistake of removing the charitable deduction, the home mortgage deduction, or the catastrophic health care deduction.
How much are the state deductions worth compared to the federal deductions for charitable giving?
Well, they're a smaller percentage of in other words, the state tax is lower than the federal tax, therefore the deduction's lower, but it's really important to remember the evidence that was just suggested by all these nonprofit leaders. In states that have done this, have made this mistake, they have seen their charitable deductions decrease, particularly from folks at the lower end of the smaller donors are really adversely impacted. So this is just a big mistake. Let's not do it.
So as the gentleman from the Howard Center said, that people don't really give out of the goodness of their heart. They're giving for the deduction.
No, people give out of the goodness of their heart, but the deduction is an added incentive for them to give, and we should not do anything to take away the incentives for Vermonters to give both to Vermont charities and to charities beyond our borders. I just want to say a word about that. In Irene, we asked folks to help us in our time of need, and they did. And Vermonters reached into their pockets. A lot of folks from outside of the state reached into their pockets and donated to us. Just 2 days ago, there was another significant earthquake in Nepal. I think Vermonters should be able to give to the Red Cross or to whatever organization is helping out the folks in Nepal, just as people helped us out during Irene. So, you know, we're all going to make some tough choices in this legislature. We're going to hopefully come together and pass a smart bill and one that balances the budget going forward for Vermonters, puts Vermont on a sustainable spending path. But taking away charitable deductions is a huge mistake.
They're not going to sign this then if it's in there, right?
That is not, as you know, we've tried that question every way and sideways, but I feel very strongly that it would be a mistake to remove the charitable deduction, the home mortgage deduction, and the catastrophic health care deduction. I think it will hurt Vermont. And my job as governor is to make sure that we do things that help Vermont, not hurt Vermont.
There are a lot of people who feel like the increase in the property transfer tax will have the same adverse impact on home buying in the state as this proposed deduction with mortgage interest. Why do you feel like that's an okay way to pay for water quality improvements?
Because I actually disagree with that assessment. I think that you know, there's no such thing as a happy tax increase. We all get that. There's an argument against any tax increase, and I can make them too. But we as a state absolutely rely on nonprofits to sustain us. And we don't want to do anything to discourage nonprofits from doing the work they're doing. I think on the property transfer tax, you know, it's often paid by folks who are buying second homes. It's paid by Vermonters when they buy a home, but you don't do that very often. And, you know, I do think that the tax is reasonable.
How is it different from the real estate deduction in terms of incenting home buying? Is, I think, what the question.
Because the home mortgage deduction applies to every single Vermonter every single year. And I just want to say a word about that. You know, under the current version, if you own a home and you have a mortgage of around $250,000, you're going to have that deduction removed from you. That's a middle-class Vermont family. That's a teacher and an engineer. At a time when we're finally seeing an economic recovery and some recovery in the real estate home building industry, where it's been just decimated from the Great Recession, the last thing we want to do is say to Vermonters, hey, we're taking away part of your home mortgage deduction, and when interest rates go up, that's going to drop from a $250,000 house down to or mortgage down to a lower mortgage. So we've got to be very, very cautious in the choices that we make.
Governor, you mentioned that this would impact not only those that are wealthy in charitably giving, but those that are in lower and middle classes in giving as well. I'm curious if you really think, at least when it comes to the House plan, that lower and middle class families are giving more than $30,000, which is 2.5 times the standard deduction.
There are different versions of the bill, and I'll let the nonprofits speak to that because they get those donations.
Well, I think it's important to note that the 2.5 times cap is for all deductions.
Right.
So that's supposed to include health, property taxes, mortgages, and charitable giving. So for a household, for a double filer, it's $30,100, something along those lines, and it's $15,500 for single filers. So they add up all their deductions, and then it's capped, right? The only deduction of that list that is discretionary, that you don't necessarily, you have a choice about, is your charitable deduction. So it's the last one on the list. So if you have expenses that are $15,500 as an individual filer, that would create a disincentive for you to give a particularly generous gift in one year or many gifts to many organizations, which might be the habit.
Yeah.
It's also, the bill is looked at retroactively for this year, and if you look at philanthropic trends, it's the last 3 months of a calendar year when the majority of philanthropy comes in. So if this goes into place, the last 3 months will be irrelevant because people will start counting if they're going to use their deductions. It will further de-incentivize them in the most important time of giving, you know, in October, November, December. Year-end giving is essential to all of us for the bottom line.
What's your plan, Governor, for the philosophical exemption bill that looks like it's going to be coming to your desk?
Well, as you know, there are strongly held and strongly expressed feelings on both sides of this issue. And as you know, I've been sympathetic to both. I think Vermonters should vaccinate their kids. I'm discouraged that the bill that we passed isn't having the effect 2.5 years ago of leading to higher vaccination rates. And I'm sympathetic to the notion that we've got to move more quickly. So, you know, I'll review the bill as I do with all bills. I'm inclined to sign it, but I'll read it when it comes over to me.
Last week you said it wasn't going to get to your desk. You sounded pretty sure about that. Do you know what changed? What moved forward?
Do I know what changed? You know, I guess all I know is that I deal with the bills that are sent to me, and it still hasn't gotten to my desk, but it looks like it may.
Do you believe the bill would increase vaccination rates, whether or not you agree with it as it stands, if it were to go into effect?
You know, we'll see. Let's hope so. You know, as I've made clear, I would have preferred not to go this route. I wish we'd been successful with the bill that we passed. Sometimes I think that if we had included the amendment that Representative Donahue offered yesterday, maybe we would have had more success. I wish we'd done that then, but we are where we are, and our rates are not going down.
On the water bill, does it do enough long-term that the EPA will be satisfied?
Well, I sure hope so. Our bill makes a lot of sense. Basically, you know, the EPA solution would be a real problem for Vermont because their only hook in the Clean Water Act, because Congress can't change it or hasn't changed it, hasn't amended it, is to require us to improve our wastewater treatment plants. And that's only 3% of the problem in Vermont. That doesn't mean that there aren't wastewater treatment plants we should go after that are a percentage of our challenge. But overall, on average, they're 3% of the problem. So I'm going to work very closely with Gina McCarthy, the EPA administrator, who I'm very close to try work out, you know, try and make the case that this bill is going to make a huge difference in the long run in actually improving Vermont's waterways, and the EPA approach will not.
You fought pretty hard for this bill, though, so have you had some assurance from them that this will do it?
I've been in communication with Administrator McCarthy throughout the discussion we've been having in the legislature, and I continue to believe that they're going to be happy with the work that we've done. Now, it won't mean that they just say, you know, everything you've done is beautiful. We're not going to have any requirements on you whatsoever. They won't do that. But I do think we're in much better shape than we would have been had we not passed this bill. And most importantly, this bill is actually going to lead over time to the reduction of blue-green algae that's making our lakes so unswimmable, to cleaner water, and to giving back to Vermonters what we cherish the most, which is natural resources that aren't polluted.
This bill doesn't spend nearly as much money as was suggested would be needed in several reports leading up to this point. Do you think more will need to be spent in the future to truly clean up our waterways, or can we go with a $20 million or so investment a year when much more was suggested as being needed?
I think realistically no one can answer that question. We're going to learn as we go, but here's the good news. In the past, I think we have spent money on water cleanup without the knowledge that we have now. And what we know now is where the primary pollution sources are coming from, and we can actually rank them in terms of what we go after first, going after the largest challenges and moving back from there. So I think we're going to see results in this bill, and that's, I think, what I care about, and I know that's what Vermonters care about.
But would a former general election opponent be a non-starter for you?
You know, I just haven't given it any thought, to be candid with you, but I don't care. The answer is no, that would not be a non-starter.
You've always appointed people to vacant seats from the party of the departing legislator, right? Is that right?
I believe I have. I know that both my recollection is that both past governors, Governor Douglas and Governor Dean, departed from that tradition.
Would you consider departing from that tradition, or do you expect to?
No, I'm not trying to be evasive, team. I am working really hard to make sure that the charitable deduction doesn't go away in Vermont, that the home mortgage deduction doesn't go away in Vermont, that the catastrophic health care deduction doesn't go away in Vermont, that we do a little more cutting before we call it quits in the appropriations bill, and that we come up with a smart revenue package that doesn't disrupt job growth and quality of life in Vermont. So that's what I'm focused on.
What do you think what the House did to the economic development bill?
It's long.
Would it lead to economic development?
I'm going to let them confer about that bill and hope that it's sensible when it gets to me.
Obviously, economic development was one of your priorities when you laid out the path for the legislature this spring. Why are you so eager to weigh in on the budget and taxes, but looking to avoid weighing in on closely tied economic development?
Listen, I desperately want a smart economic development bill, and I think we can get one. You know that there's some differences between the House and the Senate, and let's see what they do. Meanwhile, I'm working on trying to create jobs. We're getting some success. We have the 6th lowest unemployment rate in America right now. We got the lowest unemployment rate this side of the Mississippi. And I'm actively involved in talking to companies both in Vermont and outside of Vermont in coming to the best state that you can possibly come to find an incredibly capable workforce and quality of life so that we can continue to grow those jobs. So I think we're on track. I think we're doing good work. I'd love to have a bill that helps us continue to do that work. And the most important piece to me is the veggie piece that I called for in my budget address that allows us to use a really smart incentive program to help us bring jobs to Vermont.
Are you opposed to using the funds that have been labeled the IBM funds to create a first-time homebuyer tax credit as the House proposed?
Yeah, let me first say that they've been labeled not by me, but by others as the IBM fund. Originally, that was our intent with those funds. I've made very clear, I hope, that the $2.5 million that I hope we'll have in place at the end of this session is not being used for IBM, nor have they requested it. So the reason that I want to keep that fund in place is that we are actively talking to companies that would be a great benefit to Vermont. And that gives us the tools that the fund was intended to, which is to help us compete with some other states that are competing for those same jobs to hope that we land 1 or 2 or 3 of them. So that was the intent of the fund. That's what I hope we'll use it for.
What else is the fund used for?
So far, nothing. I mean, that was the intent of it. That's what I want to use it for. I want to make clear I gave a lot of it back in both my budget rescission last year and my budget proposal. The 2.5 was left in place for a really specific reason. I can't speak specifically about individual initiatives, but we're making some hopeful progress in conversations with companies outside of Vermont that might be coming to Vermont and inside Vermont that could grow here, for which that fund would be incredibly helpful in bringing those deals home.
You said last summer that you had 2 businesses that were looking at coming here that might use that fund. Are those 2 businesses still considering it, or are they long gone?
We now are talking to more than 2.
Are those 2 still considering it?
Yes, 2 of them are still in the running.
What are your thoughts? We've got about 3 days left, still need compromises on child protection, education, plus the budget and taxes. Are you concerned?
Well, I don't want to say I'm concerned. I'm encouraged. And, you know, we went out in January between the inaugural address and the budget address with one of the most ambitious agendas that I've certainly put forward as a governor. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get a balanced budget that puts us on a sustainable spending path, that we're going to clearly get a clean water bill that's long overdue, is a huge priority of mine, that we're going to get an energy bill that I feel very, very strongly about, that we're going to get an education bill. I mean, this is a remarkable thing that's going to finally do the right things to improve quality and over time reduce the unsustainable costs in our education system. And that we're going to get a bill that makes sure our kids are adequately protected. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed, hoping that we get all those bills across the line. If we do, I'll get 90+% of my agenda and I'll be incredibly happy.
Do you think the education bill can lower property taxes if there's no mandate and no spending caps?
I think the education bill that's being contemplated is going to finally build a partnership with local communities that will result in an education delivery system that was designed for 120,000 students being affordable as we move and improve quality, as we move to a system that's serving 78,000 students and a number that's continuing to drop. In other words, listen, this one's evaded governors for a long time. How do we come up with a bill that has the right carrots to work in partnership with communities to actually fix a problem we all have together, which is we've got a system that was designed for a heck of a lot more kids than we've got. That number is going to continue to drop, and we are in a partnership to improve quality and reduce cost as we fix those challenges. I'm incredibly encouraged by the bill that's coming forth.
You really think you're going to get 90% of your agenda when the central plank of your agenda was this payroll tax and the Medicaid cost shift provisions, and those aren't going to happen?
Well, clearly you don't think I'm going to, but I do, Paul.
Okay. So what about healthcare, though, Governor? Do you have, do you think the House and Senate proposals to put, $11, $12 million into healthcare, is that meaningful? Should that be done?
It's mighty slim.
What about the taxes to pay for them?
Again, I would be cautious to spend revenue on anything except solving our budget challenges before we solve that problem.
We have about 2 weeks left before the first milestone in Vermont Health Connect deadlines. How is that going? What have you heard recently about how that progress is coming?
We're cautiously optimistic. I mean, as you know, with any big technology project, and this is one, not everything is always predictable, but we continue to be cautiously optimistic that we're going to make it.
Have you received any indications that it won't be made?
No, we're on track. But again, as with any big technology project, everything is possible, but we're on track.
You may have said this earlier, you keep referencing budget cuts you want to make. Can you just describe the specific budget cuts you're proposing that have not been rejected out of hand by the legislature?
Well, we put forth roughly $8 million worth of additional suggestions a week and a half ago when we realized that the payroll track wasn't going to be adopted, which is what led us into this challenge. And we would like to see, a good portion of that package be adopted.
So you're just still looking at those $8 million, those
yes.
ones you outlined. You've got nothing more on the table.
Well, they adopted about $1.5 million of it, so that's good. We'd just like to see them continue to consider some of the other recommendations that we made.
You put nothing else forward in negotiation?
No, but let's put it this way: if they took a hunk of those, I'd be happy. In other words, we just need to do some additional cutting so that we're not sitting with a $70 million problem or 60 or 50 next year.
And is it $8 million is your target, or $10 million? I heard you say both.
I would take anything that anyone can come up with that's manageable. So if it's higher than, 7 or, well, they've already taken $1.5 million of them. So we now have 6.5 on the table. And if folks can think of other ways to reduce, I'm all ears. I just think, this is simple math. This is not a new theme for me. As I've said, and I think legislative leadership said at the beginning of this session, we've got to come up with a sustainable spending path. And that means not coming back to a huge problem next year. And I think leadership agrees with me that they don't want to come back to a huge problem next year. When the payroll tax didn't go forth, it really did take off the table $40 million of solution to the health care problems we're going to face next year because my dedicated income source for healthcare was gone. So all I'm saying is let's do as much as we can in the next 3 days to minimize that challenge that we have next year.
Don't you need more than $8 million? Because you said if you don't go along with the charitable contributions and the other deductions, you want to make up that loss of revenue through additional cuts?
So as I said before, this is going to take a two-pronged approach. We're going to have, I believe, that we should be cutting more before we ask Vermonters to pay more. I also am willing to work together with the legislature to come up with a revenue package that's sensible. Sensible is not taking away charitable deductions, taking away home mortgage deductions, and taking away catastrophic health care deductions.
Are you still expecting a health care bill this year?
Too early to say, but let's put it this way. I'm not expecting the health care bill that I wanted to get.
Is it worth doing at this point?
You can't have this conversation in isolation. In other words, if you look at the revenue sources that have been passed in the building to take care of the healthcare spend, whatever number they come up with, you've also got to look at where we are now with both the budget and the revenue package. So, you know, I think my answer is pretty clear. I'm cautious about the healthcare spend because we need to reduce spending.
How are you going to deal with, what is it, a projected $20 million increase in Medicaid for the current fiscal year?
It's actually closer to 40. That's the, you know, and frankly, that's why my solution made some sense. But it's $10 million. Well, anyway, it's closer to $40 million of higher increased healthcare costs next year.
How are you going to pay for that?
That's exactly why we're having this conversation. I mean, that's the point. Do some additional cutting, and let's make sure we get out with a smart revenue package.
Governor, if there are so many problems with this budget and it's such a crucial issue.
Well, I want to be clear. I have said many, many times, and I'll say it again, the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Appropriations Committee have done extraordinary work this year cutting the budget. I'm proud of the work they've done. Because we aren't adopting the entire package that I laid out this January, which would have given us a $40 million surplus to apply to healthcare costs, and because we all know that our healthcare costs are going up $40 million next year, I believe that we need to do some additional cutting and come up with a smart revenue package.
The thrust of my question, sir, is many lawmakers have said we would have liked to see you or your representatives in the building making these points.
But can I just back up? Can I answer that? I brought leadership around my table as long and as often as they would listen to tell them why it was so important that we adopt the plan I put forward. I did that up until 2.5 weeks ago. Go talk to the Senate leadership. I brought the Finance Committee and many members of the Finance and Appropriations and Leadership and Healthcare into my office on the Senate side. Continued to push what I thought was the right thing to do for Vermont. When it became clear that they weren't going to, which was quite recently, in the last 12 days, I've been incredibly consistent in explaining why it is necessary to do additional cuts in the budget because of that inaction. So I don't know how I could have been any more clear or involved in the conversation.
You made it clear to Senate and you made it clear to leadership early in the session that Medicaid was going to have a $40 million problem.
I made clear that by finally having a dedicated source of revenue for health care that was going to grow next year, because we were only getting part of the fiscal year when we began my proposal to fix that, that we would have the ability to use those dollars to pay down health care costs going forward.
But you didn't say specifically that Medicaid was going to be underwater next year to them.
Well, no, we all knew that. Listen, I want to back up on what's leading us into this. $10 million of it is because of FMAP, because our incomes keep rising compared to other states. So we're losing $10 million there. $22 million of it is because we have a 53-week Medicaid year, which happens every once in a while. So that's how we got here. And yes, leadership knew that. I knew that. We all knew that. Or anyone asked knew that.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go nonprofits.
Watch the Governor's press conference each week at this time here on Vermont PBS World. You can also log on and see previous press conferences at our website, vermontpbs.org.